I didn't know if we were going to have snow or not.
Again.
Again. And I thought, even if there's a foot of snow out there, I'm wearing my sandals. It's all up to the divine spirit. A couple of months ago, I got as a gift a book by Sylvia Brown, All Pets Go to Heaven. Some of you may have read it. It's the spiritual lives of the animals we love. That here on earth, it's not that much about them actually being in heaven, but about them being spiritual here on the planet. And I find that most spiritualists, so spiritual people, it doesn't matter what faith you follow, but I find most spiritual people really love animals, or at least respect them, knowing that they too are creations of God. What I call his furry children. And I've got a few furry grandchildren. I've got 8 grand cats and a grand dog and a couple of grand ferrets. And the best thing about it is they know I'm grandma. We understand how much they do help mankind in so many ways, such as lowering blood pressure, and when you're feeling depressed, they pick you up. They neutralize negative energy without absorbing it. They save lives, and they see things and feel things that we can't. You might see your cat playing with an imaginary friend, or your dog staring at something, growling at something that's not there. Well, it is, but you don't see it. So we as humans, we don't have the right to say that we're better than animals just because we are of the human race. Because are we really more advanced, like, especially with pets, where they're more advanced, is they love you no matter who you are, what race or culture, what mood you're in, they still love you. It's unconditional love. And what a wonderful world this would be if we were like that, if the humankind was like that, if we could learn from our pets and follow them. In the book, Sylvia Brown's grandmother used to say, if you find someone that doesn't like animals, children, or music, run. And she would tell the story of a family many, many years ago that lived in Missouri, where the winters were horrendous. And the parents had stepped out for a few minutes to get some supplies because a snowstorm was coming. So they left their baby sleeping in the crib and left the German Shepherd to watch over, which I guess way back in those days you could do that, but not today. But while they were out to get their supplies, the storm came earlier than expected, so they were much later getting home than they realized it would be. So when they got home, the house was freezing cold, and to their shock, the baby wasn't in the crib. And the German Shepherd was cringing and whimpering under the bed, so the father kind of put 2 and 2 together and grabbed his rifle, thinking the dog either harmed or worse, killed the child. So as he aimed the rifle to the dog's head, and just as he was to cock it, he heard a faint cry under the bed. So he looked, and there was the baby, all wrapped inside the dog. The dog had taken the baby out of the crib and put him under the bed and wrapped his body around him to keep the baby warm. So the dog wasn't taught to do this. When you get a puppy, you don't teach them to take your baby out of the crib. So how did the dog have such logical reasoning to save a human being? It's not even the same species. Was it instinctively or spiritually? Was he directed by a higher power, or was he influenced by God? And then there's unconditional love as well. And animals have feelings. Last week, Reverend spoke of her 2.5-year-old grandson, Thomas, who would go up and hug a stranger because he knew that person was a good person, and he knows which ones to stay away from. And that's the same as animals. They know. Allison and I had gone a few months ago to a house to talk to a young teenager who was experiencing paranormal activities, or she thought she might be going crazy. So we went over to talk to her, and her beautiful white cat came up to us several times and sniffed us, and the girl in her mother's jaws had just dropped in amazement and said that The cat never does that. Whenever someone comes in the house, she's gone. Can't find her. Wouldn't even know she had a cat. But this cat knew that Allison and I were animal lovers and that we wouldn't hurt her. They know. Pets become so much a part of the family that when they do die, they leave a huge void within the family, within your heart. And Sylvia Brown says in her book that animals don't reincarnate, they don't have to. They don't need the lessons of life that humans do. They're just pure entities sent from God. Well, maybe so or maybe not, but I like to think that they can choose whether to return or not. And each pet has their own distinct personality, and each one's loved in their own special ways, sometimes even more than people. And when they pass, you notice things that remind you of them, like not greeting you at the door, their toys are scattered all around, or empty food dishes. You might feel them around you, or feel them on your bed, or brush against you. But as they say, life goes on, so you go on. You might even find another pet to fill that void. It's not a pet to replace the one that passed, but to fill that hurtful void. And I personally know that when animals cross over, when your pets cross over, they do come around you. A little over 9 years ago, I lost my 13-year-old white German Shepherd named Jeannie. She was my companion, my protector. And I've had a few times, even in this room, people who don't even know me have come up to me and said, every time I see you, there's this big white dog in spirit beside you. And I say, yeah, that's my Jeannie. I've also taken pictures with my camera, and I look in the camera, and there she is, in spirit. So I know that she comes around, and so do your pets. And people who think animals are dumb or beneath us, they seem to look at life like in a tunnel vision. They don't see the whole picture, and certainly don't see how much animals have an effect on humans. Humans seem to view and believe all things in extremes, meaning they usually see all sides to a particular question or an idea. And then we have various thoughts, and we know thoughts are real. And we develop theories and philosophies from those viewpoints and beliefs, which can be a good thing, but sometimes we can be so wrong. And our emotions can create bigotry and hatred, even war, and harm to the earth and animals and other human beings. So humans aren't perfect, and neither are animals. They're not perfect creations of God. And they're just a different type of creation. And man has always compared other creations with themselves, always saying that man is the highest. It's the highest of all God's creations. Some feel that the animals and other living things don't even have feelings. They don't have a soul. Can we honestly say that? And according to the book of Genesis in the Bible, God gave us dominion over all living things. But does that give us the right to mistreat them or kill them? The word dominion also means responsibility to care for and to ensure the survival of all living things. If you look it up in the dictionary, it also means to manage, to keep in check, to keep an eye on. So the imperfection of mankind has made man totally responsible in killing off many animals and plant life, even to extinction. We abuse the planet and take away many of its natural resources, creating an environment of pollution that we'll never recover from. So what have animals done to harm this planet? Well, that's an easy answer. And those that do kill, they do it for survival or defense. And most animals actually contribute to the natural order of nature. That helps keep this planet fit for mankind to live in. It is a divine order in nature that keeps it stabilized and balanced. But it's mankind, which is the only creation on this planet, that has upset the balance, and we continue to do so. So just who's the most civilized? If you go to spiritualnetwork.net, in this section on animal totems, there's 11 short questions, and it'll help you answer the above question. So number 1, could you survive in the wild for your whole life without weapons or tools? 2, could you catch a fish with your hands? Well, maybe some people have. 3, could you migrate without a compass or even know when it was time to migrate? 4, could you carry 10 times your body weight like an ant? I think I'd be flattened. 5, could you know what you can and cannot eat in the wild? 6, could you weave a bird's nest or a spider's web? 7, could you go through your whole life happy like an animal does? 8, could you experience the moment like an animal does? 9, could you get along with 5 to 20 other beings for your entire life and remain in the herd? 10, could you spend hours resting and contemplating, perhaps in communing with God? I think some of us are working on that. 11, could you take hours a day to just be with your family and to simply play and hug and love like most mammals? I think some of us are working on that too. I added a 12th one because I thought it was important. Could you live your whole life without material things like an animal does? Animals aren't necessarily better or worse than we are. They're just different. And we should recognize and accept that they have just as much to survive as we do. There's a Cheyenne saying, if a man is as wise as a serpent, he can afford to be as harmless as a dove. A Lakota saying, when a man moves away from nature, his heart becomes hard. And we know that Native Indians have learned a lot from the animals. They know that animals, all animals and living things, are God's creation, and they should be respected. Animals have psychic abilities. They can sense our thoughts, which are real, and maybe even read them. This book has a number of stories that prove this to be so, but I'm not going to tell about them all. But there is one about a very depressed woman who no longer wanted to live. She wanted to commit suicide, and she decided that's what she's going to do. But as she held the pills of death in her hands and about ready to swallow them, she looked down and saw her dog just staring at her, sitting there staring at her, as if to say, why do you want to go? Who will I play with? Don't leave me yet. So she put the pills down and never did it again. But how did this dog know how to make that particular look? Probably with the big brown eyes. You know how they look with the head cocked and the big brown eyes? How do you know to do that? How do you know it would work? How did he even know that these pills would succeed in doing what his owner was trying to achieve? And most of all, why would he even care? There's your unconditional love. And many pets try to communicate with us, but sometimes we don't get the meaning till much later, and sometimes it's too late. We've heard of nursing homes where the nurses know which patient is going to pass away through the night because the house cat at the nursing home would sit on that particular patient's bed and just stay there and purring and keeping him warm until he crossed over. It's as if that cat was trying to help the patient move to the next journey, to the other side. And pets will often stay with someone who's seriously ill or even dying. I know of a woman many years ago, she would take her big dog to go visit her elderly mother. Her elderly mother still lived in her house. And they'd go every day to check on her. There was one day where the dog would not leave the elderly woman's side. No matter how much the owner called her and said, come on, let's go, she wouldn't go. Until the owner had to go and physically drag her out of the house. And then the next day, well, the woman and her dog went to check on the mother and found she had passed away. But they found later she had a reaction to some new medications and got dizzy and fell and banged her head. So how did the dog know that was her last night? How did the dog know she was going to pass that night? Animals can sense danger. There's a story in here of a woman that's pacing back and forth in her house, looking out the back window and in the front window at a violent storm that was going on outside. And just as she was going back to the front of the house, her dog stopped her, just stood right in front of her and stopped her and started growling. And that got her angry, so she tried to move the dog out of the way, but the dog bit her, which he had never done before. But at the time he bit her, lightning had struck right in the spot where she would have been standing had he not stopped her. So how did the dog know that lightning was going to strike right in that spot? How would he even know that lightning would harm or even kill his owner? Where does this information come from? Because they're not taught. Is it a gut feeling? Is it sixth sense or a higher power? There's also a story, I won't tell you about it because it's funny, you have to read it. But it's about a cat who manages to let its owner know that her husband is cheating on her and who with. So they do have feelings, because how would the cat know that this would upset its owner? How does the cat know that this is wrong, what her spouse is doing is wrong? Where's that information come from? And when animals die, they do go to the other side. As Sylvia Brown says, it's a perfect environment, maintained and nourished by God, and there are no fleas. According to Sylvia Brown, all animals, including our pets, are just little souls that just pass through a brightly lit portal or a gateway from our world to the next. It's a place of beauty, love, peace, where we all get along. Truly a place where the lamb lies down with the lion. And just like our loved ones that cross over, they can help us from the other side, so can our animals. Animals are spiritual, they're very spiritual. It's not taught, it just comes naturally. And we can learn a lot from them. Animals are God's gift to humans, and humans should be God's gift to animals. Let us love them unconditionally and respect them spiritually. And I have, I'll put at the back counter, it's an old poem, The Legend of Rainbow Bridge. And on the back is another one, I'm Still Here. And they're just comforting poems for anyone who has lost a pet, or if you know anyone that's lost a pet. It lets you know how they're feeling on the other side, what's going on the other side. So anyone who's lost a pet, this would be very helpful too. So grab one for yourself, or if you know somebody, or even if you have a pet that's young and healthy, take one home and put it aside for when you need it. So I want to thank you for your time. Thank you for listening to me. And God bless you all, and God bless your pets. Thank you.